Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Sila Tirupati, CSIR National Institute of Oceanography, Goa. I will be talking about under the subject Indian culture. The paper is Principles and Methods of Archaeology, and the module is Maritime Archaeology, Excavation and Retrieval of Findings. The another important aspect of maritime archaeological studies is excavation and retrieval, that is recovery of the findings, both small and big artifacts, both organic and inorganic artifacts. Before excavation or in maritime archaeological excavations, we should know the difference between land archaeology and underwater archaeology, particularly the sites. In land archaeology, what happens? The archaeologist, go to the field, we go for village to village survey or to the sites, and we find the findings on the surface, sometimes in the rain gullies. Okay. Therefore, it is suggested that if anybody undertakes any exploration, after the monsoon, you will get very good evidences, particularly in the land excavation. But in underwater sites, the sites are totally different from the land because these are buried and you do not know where the sites are. And sometimes to get the information on underwater sites, we get lot of information from the fishermen and amateur divers. Sometimes unknowingly if there are some explorations are going on and they get some evidences, those are the chance findings. But when you undertake exploration in underwater sites, if it is a shipwreck, if are exposed on the seabed, then you will get some pottery, wooden timber of the ship and cannons and all kind of things. And those light material will be in the seabed, and heavy material sometimes buried with the sediment, if not exposed on the seabed. This is the difference between land archaeology and underwater archaeology. In land archaeology, you can see those on the surface, but in underwater archaeology, those will be either buried or little bit exposed. So you have, during exploration, you have to find, generally it comes to light, you can see them during exploration on the seabed. Okay. And as I told you that there are some chance findings also in underwater archaeology. And the excavations is also not same as like underwater archaeology or land archaeology. It is the methods are different. But one thing is that the objectives of archaeology, both land and underwater, is same. That is preservation of heritage, and we should preserve them for the future generations, and for the general public, we should inform them the present status of the site or of that culture to the general public. And in underwater archaeology, before excavation, it is exploration is carried out, that is a pre-disturbance survey. In pre-disturbance survey, that means you are not going to disturb the site at all. Besides that, or in addition to that, what you are going to do it, you will take a full thorough exploration to see the distribution, how far the site is distributed and how far you are getting the remains. For that purpose, sometimes you have to do also underwater probing, and the sediment which are deposited on those underwater sites, those things can be removed by if very less quantity of sediment is there, by hand fanning. Okay. If not, you can remove those sediment or deposited material by airlifting or by water dredges. And after that, study, documentation and everything. It depends upon the project objective and funding and other things for the recovery of artifacts. And after recovery, the first and foremost thing is preservation, then the conservation. So there are different methods to recover the findings from the underwater. We have to do the underwater probing. Probing means you have to probe it by some system. That system is generally what we do. We take mild steel rods, say 75 to 1 meter in long, and the points will be, the tips will be little pointed, and you should have one handle to hold it. So what we do, we go with that probing rod and we go outer extent of the site and go on totally putting that probing rod into the seabed, and you can, wherever if there are any material, say metal or pottery or any kind of things, you will get a sound. Okay, and every 1 meter or less than a meter distance, if you will go on probing that one, wherever there are some kind of remains, you will get the feeling, because that rod won't go beyond that one, it will hit, you will get the sound also. Then you can extend your survey, that pre-disturbance survey. Based on that, you can demarcate the area, and it is necessary because those are buried objects will be there, so the probing is required. And if there are from there also you can understand from the probing how much is the overburdened material, that is the sediments. Okay. Even during probing also you will know whether there are metal objects or wood is there or pottery is there, and during probing we have to take utmost care that these findings should not be damaged. Then it will determine what kind of tool you have to use to remove that overburdened material from the site as well as from the artifacts. And from the visual you can understand the schematic view of the underwater probing, where you can see that diver, 2-3 divers are there, and it is a shipwreck site, and cannons you can see, timber of the ship you can see, anchor you can see, all kind of artifacts are laying on the seabed. It is a schematic view to have one idea, and one of the diver is probing at the one corner, so he will feel how much is the deposit is there. Accordingly, the decision will be taken how the excavation will be carried out. And for underwater excavation, generally two methods are used, two tools are used. One is airlift, another is water dredging. And both the airlift and the water dredge have their own merits and demerits, but it depends upon the site and your objective of the project. Airlifting is a tool, it is excavation tool for underwater sites to remove the sediment, and generally a rigid steel pipe was used earlier. Now because of developments and space and budget, all kind of things, a PVC pipe of required size 10 to 15 centimeter diameter can be used, and the length can be required size, and in lower end you can connect the hose pipe, and a compressor is required to supply air. Air will pass through the air pipe, and there will be a gap between the airlift mouth and the connector. So what is the method system? When the air will come, air is supplied through the pipe, there will be a vacuum is created because there is water is there. Okay, so that air will come up. So there is a vacuum created, and that vacuum will suck the material from the seabed. It is the system, okay, very simple system, but it has got lot of merits to use at particular sites, shipwrecks and all those things, and the diver or the maritime archaeologist have to take a lot of precaution while lifting the handling the airlift. And sometimes what happens, because why you have to take the precaution, because light materials, small materials may go along with that mud and water to the along with the water to the discharge point. For that purpose, what generally is done, a sieve, a filter is kept at the collection point. If unexpectedly, if small artifacts are sucked up by the airlift, it can be collected at the discharge point. Airlift is very good tool. There is no restriction. You can use it in 10 meter, 15 meter, 20 meter water depth, and it has got a lot of plus points, because depth is not a problem, and it can be worked very well, and it depends upon what kind of airlift you are making, how much air pressure is required, what is your water depth, and what should be the length of your pipe and size, and what kind of things you are looking for. Okay, that way airlift has got its own points, merits, and the biggest advantage is it can be used at any water depth. Say 20 meter, 30 meter and below that. Whereas airlift, water dredge is a system which is totally different from airlift operations. The slide here, we have used airlift in Dwarka waters, and top one is the documentation. That means that has been in underwater, it has been photographed, and there are some stone structures, and the airlift suction that made of GI pipe, it has been kept, and in the second photograph down, how it is collected on the surface, and the third one is schematic view. In the schematic view, why we have used the schematic view and we are using PVC pipes is that that steel pipes are very heavy and it is very difficult to handle. We noticed several times in Dwarka waters. Then we thought instead of steel pipes, we should use PVC pipes. And when we used PVC pipe for airlifting, it was more effective and it was more handy to use, and it was good also because space wise, economy wise and all those things. Then we are nowadays almost every maritime archaeologist of the world, they are preferring these PVC pipes, and the result is very effective. Coming to the water dredge, it is a system, and there is a difference between airlift and water dredge. Airlift is used vertically, whereas water dredge is used horizontally. And for airlift, you need a compressor, but here you need a pump, water pump. And in water dredge, water is supplied instead of air, and in airlift, you were collecting the overburden material and sometimes the archaeological artifacts on the surface. But in the water dredge, the material will be discharged little bit away from the site on the seabed itself only. And cost wise, water dredge is very simple and very economical. If the visibility is poor also in the site, water dredge is much more effective to use. And what happens in airlift, sometimes the water which is discharged into the area again, it reduces the visibility sometimes, particularly in Indian waters, but water dredge is not having that problem. And water dredge is easy to use, requires less space on the boat, and it has greater adjustability, but which is lacking in airlift. You can see this PowerPoint presentation how the water dredge is used. But in India, we have not used so far water dredge because of, see, because we are using constantly airlift, and after when we started using PVC pipe, we are happy with the output and results, so it is there with us, and we have not tried with water dredge. But being during our foreign expeditions particularly, we have used water dredge in I have used water dredge in Portugal waters when we were exploring and excavating a historical period shipwreck in the rivers of Portugal. That was very effective there because of the less visibility. And now coming to another point is the underwater gridding. You know why gridding is required? Suppose the site is big and you want to plot it systematically on the land, so a grid is required, and it is nothing but a grid can be prepared with GI pipes or plastic non-floating high density pipes, and it can be a scale, you can be painted with like a scale 15-20 meter distance, and the ropes can be tied to that, and it can be placed over a object or artifact, and then it becomes easy if we will record systematically. Then while transferring to the final stage, the figure or the output will show according to the scale, and it helps to obtain accurate position and precise measurements of the artifact or the structure or the shipwreck. Okay. Secondly, a group 2 or 4 divers can use this grid, and we have used this in Dwarka waters, and it serves as a square in the land excavation sites. And while mapping also, this grid helps for preparing the maps, and especially if the grid is firmly placed close to the seabed. And as I told you that some structures of Dwarka we have plotted with placing the grid. Here is that you can have a look to the PowerPoint presentation, how the grid has been placed and how the divers are recording it. See, one diver is taking the measurement of the structure and another diver is plotting it, and even while in operation it has been documented because it was possible, the visibility is good, and that has been done there. And after excavation, that is your airlift and water dredge and putting the grid, it requires now obtaining the position. In land you can take the position with your available equipments, but in underwater, see, unless until you have accurate position, when you close down your work, one field season, after the completion of one field season, when you are going to the same site, it becomes very difficult, particularly from the surface of the water, where you had where the structures are lying or where your remains are lying, and how to locate it from the surface. Therefore, in earlier days, sextants were used to get the position, then mini rangers were used. Now with the development of technology, GPS are used, and there are two types of, one is a handheld GPS. Nowadays even the mobile cameras are having GPS system. It becomes handy to get the location accurately, the latitude and longitude. But the another method is DGPS, okay, where you will get much more accurately the site, the location of the sites. But in GPS, we have used in different sites, both in the Shipwrecks, Goa, Pumpuar, Mahabalipuram, Dwarka, and Bed Dwarka also. And you can, based on the GPS also, you can navigate and you can plot other points which can give you the coordination from one point to another point, and that helps to record on the final report. Okay. And if you want to relocate, as I told you earlier, it is useful GPS, and GPS is suggested that the readings of the GPS can be obtained at regular intervals. You know, what does it mean? Suppose if you have a GPS and you are working at a site, it is not advisable after, in 1 point or 2 points of getting the positions. I hope, see, what I mean is, when you are using a GPS, you should take minimum 10 to 15 positions. The same point, your computing digits will come different if you are holding the GPS at the same point. Okay. Then you have to, suppose if you have taken 10 or 15 positions, then you can make a what is that called, average value of those points, then you will get the accurate position. Even I can tell you in this way, while taking GPS positions, you take 10 to 15 times value, then you average it, then you will get the accurate point. Average means you total all the points and then you divided by 10 or 15, the point which will come, that will be the accurate, and we have done it, and we have relocated our structures in the subsequent year. And in the picture, in the PowerPoint presentation picture, you can see that GPS, and we have been using NAV 5000 DLX, that GPS, and gives accurate position, and it is okay. And then secondly, after GPS, it requires to the team, to the project leader, whether you want to retrieve any of the artifacts or not. If you want to retrieve the artifacts, you have to follow certain guidelines. General principle, nowadays, it is not preferred to retrieve any of the artifacts because we have to keep them for the future generation, for their future studies. So we can record them, document them, and we can analyze the output based on the recordings. But the problem is, if unless until we retrieve the valuable artifacts, those things will be either, destroyed by, they may be looted by the treasure hunters, or it may be destroyed by the environment impact, or there will be corrosion and accretion effect will be there based on the environment. In view of this, it is, felt that some of the artifacts can be retrieved for future studies, and sometimes we have to collect them for further analysis to get the history of those artifacts and as well as that site. And it depends the site environment and how much possible to recover a object, and after recovery their conservation and preservation is highly essential. Nowadays, as I told you, that the general consciousness is not to collect the artifact for the future generation. We should keep them, but we cannot ignore because of the looting of the artifacts. So we have to take a stand on this issue, but that can be based on the project funding as well as the site. For lifting, you can use airbags, and you can use some lifting material. And see, suppose if you are during your exploration, if you are finding some small artifacts like pottery pieces, okay, or you are finding some coins. If there is a huge number, then that is different, but even a small pottery piece or a coin or nails or timber, if those are small and you can retrieve, it is always advisable to record them with some position this one, so it will be useful, its context and its importance. But if you are retrieving something with airbags, and if the material is bigger in size, you have to give some cushioning material before putting the object for lifting, so it should not damage, and fragile and small organic objects should be lifted very carefully, and those can be, in situ only, those plastic sheets can be used to wrap them, and it can be retrieved either by trays or bags, it can be brought out. And various types of airbags are available. You can carry the airbags, you can deflate it in underwater, and you can lift the objects, but airbags can provide a better buoyancy while lifting the artifacts. So the required amount of air you have to fill in the airbags, then it will be better. But remember one thing, while lifting the artifacts with the support of airbag, it is better to have the divers, archaeologists along with while lifting, so they can observe what is happening to the artifact. Because if there is a current or waves, there will be chances of moving the artifact this side and that side, so it should not damage. Because of those purpose, it is essential to, while lifting, a diver should be there along with those airbags. And see here in the PowerPoint, we are showing how the plastic trays are used, and a small airbag has been provided, and a diver archaeologist or a marine archaeologist is holding it, because what will happen when the airbag comes up now, it will move faster. Okay, that's what he is controlling it, and it won't damage the artifacts which is in the tray. And there is another method also to lift heavy artifacts. Here it is not from our country, it is in Australia. They have used big airbags to lift cannons from a shipwreck. Okay, you see how they have nicely wrapped the cannon. It is tightly wrapped, and they have used the this one, what is that, airbag, and you can see number of ropes, because on board on the ship, the people, those who are there, they are controlling it, because if the artifact will come away from your ship, it will be again a difficult thing. So while it is coming up slowly and slowly, that time they are pulling towards the boat or ship. Okay, and another, you can see a diver who is controlling the movement of that artifact while lifting. And how the samples are collected? See, the small, there could be organic and inorganic. Inorganic can be your pottery, ceramics and terracotta things. Okay, but if you are also collecting those things, it is not necessary that you can keep them, but it is highly essential. You should put everything, even organic or inorganic, in water, and you have to change the ratio 1:1 in the initial stage, because if it is a pottery also, or a Chinese ceramic also, or a terracotta artifacts also, over the period of time, the salt might have gone inside. Okay, so it should come out. If not, slowly the salt will come up. That because of that purpose, you have to remove that salt by keeping in fresh water. But in the initial stage, you have to keep 1:1, and every time, either in a week or fortnight, you have to take the reading of the salt, how much salt has come out from the artifacts, and again from 10 to 10, I mean you have to provide 10 liter of fresh water, then 10 liter of marine water, then you have to make 12 to 10 or 15 to 10 like that. That means 10 liters of fresh water, 15 liters of fresh water and 10 liters of marine water. Like that way, you have to increase the fresh water quantity. That should be iodine free, salt free. It should be distilled water is preferred for that purpose slowly. And then after doing that exercise, you have to measure whether salt is there or not. Then you have to keep those artifacts for long time in the fresh water, that is what we call in a solution, which is distilled water or deionized water. Then after the collection of the samples, we have to, if those are fragile, again we have to do some conservation. But I suggest it is always better if we have a conservation assistant or a conservator with us, because it is a very specialized thing, and it is always preferred to have a conservation specialist to take care of the underwater findings. And we should remember one thing: we should not expose the findings to direct the sunlight, and after proper chemical treatment we have to apply them preservations in consultation with again the conservator or the experts, and then we have to catalog it, record it, document it, and we have to thoroughly study it, and if required it can be displayed in a museum or a display. If not, it can be stored in the storage. But remember one thing: artifacts require lot of care for conservation as well as preservation, because we do not know, unless until we know their composition, it becomes difficult. And conservation of the artifacts is critical aspect. It is a job of a conservator to preserve them from further decay. And artifacts can be, as I told you, organic and inorganic, and that we have to keep in mind. Then those can be, the conservator can take them proper care and conserve them properly. Now if we will sum up this one, see, underwater archaeology is one of the, it is upcoming subject, and it is essential to study our past seafaring activities and past our maritime contacts, and maritime archaeology is essential for that purpose. And in course of our exploration we will find a lot of artifacts, as I told you, organic and inorganic, big and small, both indigenous and foreign. Okay, that is one thing, we have to take care of it. And location of site and its cultural association is also important to understand whether those are locally made or whether those are brought from abroad. And if those are abroad, after studying we will know the contacts, okay, whether it is from Red Sea coast or Persian Gulf coast or Southeast Asian countries. And as I told you before that, if you are finding anything, we have to take a decision whether excavation is required or not. But excavation decision to carry out depends upon the exploration and your pre-disturbance survey. And excavations can be carried out by airlift and water dredge. Both the systems have their own merits and demerits. And in India, airlift has been used extensively, both for shipwrecks, submerged ports, as well as submerged settlements. And if we are retrieving the artifact and conserving them for the posterity, that is for the future generation, it will be useful. And that is the first and foremost job of a archaeologist as well as a marine archaeologist for the conservation and dissemination of knowledge for the future generation. Thank you.